Okay, so to start things off today, I'm going to describe to you a young man named David, and I want you to visualize what he looks like. See, David is a regular guy in all ways except one. David has an eating disorder. David is very careful about how much and what he eats, and he spends hours in the gym every day trying to change the way he looks. This is because when David looks in the mirror, he does not see who he really is. Now, some of you may think that David looks like this. But what if I were to tell you that David actually looks like this? David has muscle dysmorphia, an increasingly prevalent disorder amongst young men entering the world of bodybuilding, defined as an anatomical maladaptation, meaning that they see themselves as smaller than they actually are. Now, to some of you, this might not make sense. How could eating healthy and going to the gym every day possibly result in such unhealthy behaviors? In fact, that is the general opinion of muscle dysmorphia, that it's an extreme case of vanity. But this could not be any less true because there are real symptoms. Individuals with muscle dysmorphia are so obsessed with the macronutrient content of their food that they will not eat anything in front of them unless they know exactly what it is. On average, they spend 5 to 6 hours a day in the gym, and perhaps most frighteningly, 50 to 100% of muscle dysmorphic individuals are steroid users. Now, behind all these physical consequences lie a series of psychological limitations as well. These individuals struggle to maintain relationships with other people due to the fact that due to their fears that having relationships are going to affect their ability to work out. And they work out despite major injuries because of that constant urge to continuously keep working out despite the pain that it causes. Now, although it's very clear that muscle dysmorphia has these symptoms, it has an issue today, and that is it's very difficult to diagnose. So going back to our case of David, we can see that it actually resembles anorexia nervosa in terms of the psychological experience of muscle dysmorphia. There's a huge distortion in individuals' perceptions of themselves. However, the behaviors are very similar to those of obsessive compulsive disorder. These individuals are constantly falling prey to their urges and face marked increases in anxiety and distress whenever they are not allowed to do the things that they want to do. Now, in reality, muscle dysmorphia is neither one of these, but rather a combination of both. It combines the psychological experience of anorexia nervosa with OCD. Sorry. So, although it is difficult to diagnose muscle dysmorphia, the actual psychological background behind it is quite simple to explain, and it really has to do with our perception. Our perception is not just what we see, but a combination of how we feel. And so, the person that we see in the mirror is a combination of our own preconceptions combined with the actual physical stimulus. Now, these can be summarized in terms of bottom-up processing, which is the actual physical thing that we see, as well as our own preconceptions, which is top-down processing. Now, this can be very clearly explained through muscular dysmorphic individuals. They have a clear imbalance in the way they perceive themselves. They are so highly driven by their own preconceptions that they are unable to see what's actually in the mirror. And so when they look in the mirror, they see something like this. Now, these preconceptions have to come from somewhere, right? Luckily for us, we've been able to identify the culprit, and that is the media. Because magazines like Men's Health, Men's Fitness, and GQ portray these ideal images of male body type and bombard young men with them constantly, causing them to fall prey to the availability heuristic. They are most influenced by what they see as ideal. Now, although these are very explicit images, there's also implicit implications on how young boys are viewing themselves today. And perhaps this is best established through the way young boys idolize superheroes. In the past 50 years, we've seen a huge change in the way the average superhero is portrayed. Let's look at Superman in the 1960s compared to Henry Cavilla's Superman today. Or Batman in the 1970s compared to Batman today. And perhaps the most shocking one, Lou Ferrigno as the original Hulk compared to the Hulk today. Now, this shows just how clearly the implicit message is of the media on young boys. They are seeing these as the new representation of what a strong superhero is, and they are trying to emulate them. Now, to give you a better example of this, a study was actually conducted in 2005 to see how young boys perceive themselves. Now, these boys were aged between 6 and 8 and asked a series of questions. First, they were asked, for example, what they would see themselves as. Now, the next question is where it gets a little bit frightening. They were asked, what do you think the ideal body type is? And on average, these boys picked a body type that was 35 to 40 pounds heavier than they saw themselves. In fact, 40% of the participants in this experiment actually asked if there was a bigger person they could choose. Now, the most frightening thing about this was the third question. how do you think others see you? And this was the most common response. These individuals, these young boys between the ages of 6 and 8 saw themselves as thinner and weaker than they actually were because of the implicit effects that media has had on them. And so now we've reached a point where we have to ask ourselves, what do we do? To some of you, muscle dysmorphia might still not be a real thing, and I might be making more of a big deal of it than it actually is. But the point today wasn't to tell you that muscle dysmorphia, wasn't just to tell you that muscle dysmorphia exists, but to tell you what it represents. Muscle dysmorphia is just the latest manifestation of the societal ideals that we've constructed and placed on young men and women today. Young men and women are shown, we've allowed an environment that allows these, we create an environment that allows these disorders to flourish in such a way that young men and women are focusing only on the parts of their body that they actually can change and not what they actually have. And so we fail to realize that perfection is really in the perception of the beholder. And so my challenge to you today is to criticize these ideals and question what we perceive as the ideal body type, because it's not enough to just have a healthy looking body, you also have to have a healthy mind. Thank you.